Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Chasing Rabbits. My name is Scott Brown, and you have found my vlog dedicated to helping you become the leader you always wished that you had worked for. So do you remember the first time you were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? I vividly remember being asked that question. I was in 5th grade, and our class had just done this project, some sort of, I don't remember exactly why we were doing it, but we did this newscast thing in our class, and we had an anchor desk and a sports desk and a weather person, and I don't know why we were doing this in 5th grade, but we did, and at the end of it, our teacher, Mr. Floriani, said, now it's going to be my turn as the roving reporter to interview all of you. So tomorrow, come ready because you get to stand up and be interviewed in the front of the class. And I think his purpose was to help us get comfortable speaking in front of other people or whatever. I'm not exactly sure why he was doing it because I don't remember tying in anything, but I was 11 years old, so I don't remember a lot of things from when I was 11 years old. But I remember the next day. I remember going to class, and one by one, Mr. Floriani called everybody up to the front of the room and asked them, so, Brian, what do you want to be when you grow up? So, Otto, what do you want to be when you grow up? So, Todd, what do you want to be when you grow up? And one by one, everybody went up to the front of class, answered the questions, and we got all those normal answers you would expect an 11-year-old to want to be. We had certainly our fair share of policemen, and people wanted to be firemen, and there were nurses in there, and of course, teachers. Everybody kind of gave those sort of answers. But then there were kind of some of those outliers too. I remember one kid said, I want to be a cowboy. And I remember thinking at 11 years old, like, I don't think that's a thing, especially in Pittsburgh, but whatever. He wanted to be a cowboy. Someone else wanted to be a clown. I was like, I can see that from her. That's perfectly reasonable considering she's the class clown. But then there were a bunch also that said they wanted to follow in their parents' footsteps. So they wanted to be an architect, or they wanted to be a lawyer, they wanted to be a surgeon, or one girl wanted to be a baker because her family owned a bakery. All of those questions all made sense. And then it came my turn, and because I was trying to go last, I wanted desperately to not do this, because the last thing I wanted to do was stand up and draw attention to myself. See, by 11 years old, my voice had already changed, I had already gone through puberty, I was the first kid to have acne, I just wanted to hide. I was like 5'9" by that point at 11 years old. Did not want to stand out. I hated being in the front of anybody. So I got called to the front of the room and my teacher asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up, Scott? And I remember standing there, petrified, frozen. And it finally hit me. I started replaying all the answers I had heard in my mind and I said, what are the other choices? Mr. Flynn looked at me and I could see the red starting to creep up through his neck and into his face. He's like, what do you mean, what are the other choices? What do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, well, I'm 11. Like, I don't know all the other choices. What are the other choices? He's like, just answer the question. I was like, well, I don't know all the choices. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I was being honest because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I clearly didn't know all of the choices. So as I was sitting outside the principal's office, after being sent down to explain why I was disrupting class, I remember sitting there and thinking, I wonder what I really do want to grow when I grow up. And what's an architect? I had no idea what an architect was. I realized that I was hearing things, I was hearing words I had never heard of before. It's like a surgeon, I think that's some kind of doctorate thing, but I don't know what that person does. I didn't know. The person who really should have known all of those things that we could possibly be didn't answer the question when he had the chance. When I asked the question, what are the other options? It would have been very easy for him to have given some other options about things I might have wanted to be when I grew up. He had the knowledge. He knew the context. He knew the bigger picture. All I knew at 11 were the things that I had been exposed to at 11, and that wasn't a lot. I was a sheltered kid from the suburbs. The only things that I knew were what my parents did. I didn't want to do those things. And what I saw on television. None of them sounded all that impressive to me. So I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. But somebody else had the knowledge of the other options that were out there. As we become leaders, as we start to guide people, sometimes we are faced with that exact same situation. Maybe it's not an 11-year-old, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's an employee, maybe it's a volunteer who's going to ask you a question because they don't even know all the possibilities that could possibly exist, but you do. And when you're asked that uncomfortable question to explain the bigger picture, what do? Do you freeze like Mr. Floriani did and tell me, go to the principal's office because you don't want to be bothered going down a list of all the other possibilities that are out there? Or do you take the time, put yourself into that person's position of not knowing and give them as much detail as possible? Sometimes we forget when we didn't know the things that we know. They're so embedded into who we are that we don't remember what it was like to not know certain things. So we have a hard time conveying that information to others. But that information is so critical to other people's successes. We're not going to be asked as adults nearly as often, what do you want to be when you grow up? Some of us are still trying to figure that out. And I know that Mr. Floriani probably had other ideas about what he thought I should be when I grow up. This probably isn't one of them. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do the next time somebody asks you the question that you have the answer for and they do not? What are you going to do the next time that somebody asks you the inconvenient question that you have to take time with? Spend the time and invest, and maybe you'll just figure out your path along the way as you help somebody else figure out theirs. Until tomorrow, my friends, I wish you well. Have a great night. Toast on, and what do you want to be when you grow up? Have a good night, everybody.